based on other conversations that we've been having, I've got a question for both of you um, that I think could be answered in many different ways by many different people. But in fine tuning, the center word that we've been thinking about recently is imagination. But I feel like that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so for each of you, as we discuss this, the word perception and the word fantasy came in around the word imagination. And so, in order to better understand each of your understanding of what imagination means, I would ask, what are the differences between those three words to each of you?
I don't know that I feel qualified to say what imagination means. What I've been exploring for myself is how does imagination live in my life? Um, it I, Going there, I feel like I have something to say about how I'm working with it, moving the way I think towards a future, and imagination in a way has a representation of thinking towards a future. And um, it's impacted by perception, which I would kind of put more into present time. And my perception is what I experience in a moment. Um, but where I'm, um, where the imaginal or um, where the imaginal comes in for me is um, I'm discovering more and more that that perception is not just a blank statement of, oh, this is pink, but it has to do with a relationship with whatever it is I'm observing or looking at. So there's relationship, and that brings in imaginal, because it brings in my possible here what I see now and what I can envision for a future. Um, and in that comes up imagination, because I'm contributing something when I make, usually in an imagination, I have connections which are expanding that perception and the context of that perception. Um, so it's a funny thing to take imagination, and I think I've said this before, out of just a mental point that I'm creating, but into relationship. And that there's a lot of studies and such that deal with perception, how that is influenced by a situational thing, people that are there, how one is feeling at a time, at a given time, how one physical body is feeling. All those impact perception, where we are in the moment. Um, and so, as does the imaginal, because it brings in uh, possibility.
And
So,
where does fantasy come in?
fantasy I see as something which is not fully established not fully engaged in relationship.
Yeah.
Fantasy is me taking an idea and building on it. And at some point, it comes into connection with the other things that are around or involved in that fantasy. Um, I can imagine or fantasize that a rock is very lightweight and I can just lift it and throw it around. But there's a point in which that fantasy moves into perception and imagination of how to hold it that brings in some other elements that have to be connected. So in that way, fantasy is just um, really connected to humanity in a sense of its the the unlimited scope of possibility that fantasy might bring into play. But then there's that place of perception and um, the reality of physicality that starts shifting fantasy into um, an imagination that can be built on. Perhaps that's a way to say it. Or are these real steps? I
Thank
think
you.
imagination has been connected to um, fantasy alone. And one of the things that I think we're trying to do with and exploring for ourselves, Ron, I think you do that with your own work and attunement and such, and I have. It's like, where does something stop being fantasy and becomes an imaginal a relationship, which is building? And so there's a fantasy can be a tool, but then it needs to move on into a relationship.
Thank you.
Ray, I think that's actually a really interesting point. And to your question, Mindy, I think Freya actually, in my own mind, answered it with basically two things. The imaginal, when I'm in an imaginal space, and I the key aspect of that is connection and relationship. It's like when I am walking in the woods and I'm my perceptions I've now moved into uh, what we've dealt with in various ways with sensory perception. I'm starting to be more aware of through my perceptions of the world around me, and I'm starting to see like the colors in green and the way that the spring vegetation is springing up on my walk, and I'm developing this deeper connection with my environment, and I begin to sense myself almost as if I'm living in a magical world. And I think I am, because now I'm moving into this imaginal recognition of the vibrancy of life around me in a new way. But it's because I have this connection, I have this relationship. When I'm in fantasy, I'm self related. I'm relating to self. I'm not connected. And Freya, you said this too, and is I'm I'm focused on me, my world, what I feel and think about world. And I can spin beautiful fantasies. I can spin I'm walking in a beautiful forest, but I'm not actually connected to that living forest around me. And it doesn't have to be a forest. I mean, it could be connected with you and Freya right now. I can feel that connection that we have. That's kind of that what I'm talking about in terms of field effect or imaginal perception. Because perception is not just a five sensory experience. Perception really, we talk about felt sense, there's proprioception, there's a lot of things, but I'm I'm experiencing, and again, Frey, I like whole body. I'm experiencing our conversation right now as a whole body experience. And we're in a field, even though we're in different places in different rooms, we're in a joint space. We're in a whole body joint space. So that's kind of how I would see it. I feel like perception and being in an imaginal space are very, I would not differentiate them. They're very much connected because it's through my whole body experience, which includes my perceptions, that I become connected with whatever my environment is.
It's interesting. Thank you. Does anyone have more to add?
The way I go with it is thinking, how do I use this? I can say, okay, this is a whole body experience, or how do I tap that? And some of it is just by softening. I might have an idea, I might have a inspiration, And then I think I have more and more started looking at the relationships. And I catch so there's two ways I can go into, okay, what are the relationships that come out of this experience, or that are not that come out of it, but that may be grounded and extended. Or I can go in the fantasy realm, I can, as you say, Ron, just be in my own thoughts, and I go round and round and round. And those um, conversations with myself, I like that definition of fantasy is sort of more as whether it's with a relationship with another person, something happens and I can be upset about it, and then if it's not finished, it goes round. I leave with that, and I spin it in lots of different ways, which are not necessarily connected and not related. If I check in on it later, it's like, no, that wasn't what they were experiencing or feeling at all. And it's like I had just spent a whole lot of time creating one trajectory that was not really grounded in anything that was there, an unnecessary energy. So that's one of the reasons why my own trying to explore imagination and imaginal, I'm also having to learn how to create some boundary for myself, new ideas or creative thinking is great, but I have to make sure that it moves me into relationship and not into an isolated pattern. That's one of the ways that I use some of what we might be talking with here on a personal level to be deepening my sense of spirit, my sense of relationship with a living universe, with a world that there's possible of exchange with, from a world that's kind of dead and that I'm just going round and round in my ideas. Um, that's that's where I use these sort of explorations that we might do on imagination, why it's useful for me.
Well, Frey, the thing we haven't said in our conversations over these last couple conversations is we've, in some ways, what we're acknowledging is an imaginal perspective is valid.
Mm.
And I just want us to acknowledge that each one of us actually experiences and recognizes that an imaginal perspective is a valid way of engaging with the world and informs us and builds relationship.
Well, it's an important and necessary ingredient. It's part of the whole web of relationship. It's part of what we can contribute. Um, I mean, I'll go back to my tulips that came up. They could seeing these bright yellow tulips this spring, and walking by them on my way out to the car when I'm out for a task. They contributed something to me. They're the future that the possibility that their yellow color and their enthusiasm for blooming, it's like, yay, the sun's out and I get to burst open. um, that is their imaginal field that I walk through contributes to my whole state of being, the way I perceive the world around me, the way I'm open to possibility myself. uh, it becomes a very integrated web of relationship with just a daily life.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, Mindy, too, is like the very act of manifestation. There is one of the things that David Spangler brought out in one of his earliest books is that we have the capacity to manifest the world around us.
Just
And
shape, yeah.
yeah, and one of the things, in the kind of way we're talking about this, we're talking about one of the things that also has come out of that is what David has referred to other people actually. David Nichols, some fellow by the name Nichols, is subtle activism.
Hmm.
So there are this imaginal world that we're talking about that each one of us can experience is first we have to actually believe in it. And we're having an interesting discussion about what the difference is between the imaginal versus the self-related or the fantasy or the personal. But there's also the effect that we have in the world around us, and creating what comes to me is that as human beings, we have this genuine capacity to shape the world we live in. And we could do that very unconsciously, or we could do it with a greater sense of awareness, more appreciation, more, let's call it love. And so we can actually, in that imaginal framework, we can empower more flowers to bloom. So that's why I think this is a big and important conversation.
Well, those are good things to think about. I thank you for diving so deeply into these questions, and that wraps up another tiny podcast.
Thank you, Mindy.
Thank you, Mindy. It's so good again. I'll say this every time, but it's true every time to see both of you and have these opportunities to chat.
Thanks.
Agreed.
Yep, me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.